False balance in looking at not the segment, not the taped news segment, but the panel interview. I believe the panelist is named George Donnelly. He mentioned that David Koch doesn't believe in climate, but it's okay to take his money. It's okay to put him on the board because the chair of your board does believe in climate change. The world science community has spoken out overwhelmingly that climate change is for real. And rationalizing David Koch's presence on the GBH board by saying, oh, good, there's somebody else there who believes in climate, there's no problem, is the first thing they teach you in journalism school about false balance. He called it balance, I call it false balance. I think it was a real misstep, and it was part of why I was disappointed in the segment. That one's big enough to rationalize the presence of someone like David Koch. Who's on your board is your business. But I got the impression throughout the discussion that they were dismissive both of the protesters raising the question and of the presence of David Koch at all. I used to live in Boston. I hold GBH to a high standard. I think Nova is beyond reproach no matter where the money comes from. That's not the issue for me. The issue is you need to watch your back when you're dealing with somebody like David Koch. His political profile is that he doesn't sit on boards and he doesn't give money unless he has a good reason. Here in Georgia, that reason is going after local and state PBS organizations. I don't think that happens in Massachusetts, where you guys are the 800-pound gorilla. But he's a bad actor in that sense, and one that presents a potential risk for PBS. He also has given, it's been tracked down, at least $67 million. The segment mentioned that he funds climate denial. It didn't say that he funds climate denial at a much, much greater pace than he funds an award-winning show like Nova. That's also reason for question. Organizations like Americans for Prosperity and the American Legislative Exchange Council are financed by David Koch and his family, primarily David and his brother Charles. They are big players in those organizations. They're their financial backbone, and part of the agenda for the legislators they back on the state basis is to go after local PBS organizations in states throughout the South and in much of the rest of the country. If it doesn't happen in Massachusetts, maybe it's because you're funded, maybe it's because you're lucky, maybe it's because that conservative base that would tend to be there it pretty clearly doesn't exist in the same way in Massachusetts as it does in the South, where I'm talking to you from. But it's a big issue down here. That also bothered me. There are other issues, and this is why I mentioned incomplete reporting, that make the Kochs a big red flag and make David Koch's presence in the GBH board a big red flag. Again, it's your business who's on your board and who you take money from. I just wish that the questions were a little sharper and they went a little deeper than they did. After funding. And that tends to lead anytime you involve funding issues, whether it's the state funding of a local state PBS or whether it's the funding of individual broadcasts. You run the risk of self-censorship. There was some lip service paid in the discussion to appearance of conflict. Appearance of conflict in journalism is a big deal. And you've got to start asking and answering a lot of questions right away when somebody like David Koch is on the board. Again, it's your business, but please ask the questions and please watch your own back. And then David Koch used his weight to begin to influence that broadcast. I would encourage your viewers to look at the reporting that's been done by Jane Mayer in the New Yorker about David and his brother Charles Koch over the last couple of years, with a focus this year on the problem at WNET. That, to me, was the first shoe dropping, the first warning sign that should really have you guys on the alert in Boston. Let me mention one other thing. Tom Fiedler is the dean. He's a distinguished journalist and the dean of the school that I graduated from at BU. Emily Rooney has sterling credentials, but I hold them to high standards, and that's why I was a little bit disappointed that Emily started the whole discussion off by saying she couldn't find statements from David Koch that he denies climate change. I'd say that $67 million in funding for climate denial groups is a pretty strong statement. If she couldn't find any quotes from him, that may be because David Koch is virtually a media recluse. He doesn't do interviews. I'd be surprised if you could find many statements from him on anything. But his track record in putting his money where his mouth isn't is that he is a denier of climate change and an enabler of bad science. The money that goes to Nova barely puts a dent in the damage he's done to scientific integrity in this country. It is appearance of conflict, and I have no problem whatsoever with the specific broadcast that Nova did earlier, or on October 2nd. That was done by a couple former colleagues and friends of mine. The producer is Kate Tobin, the correspondent was Miles O'Brien. They are beyond reproach and beyond question in terms of their integrity. The show is beyond question. That's one of the reasons why I hold it to a high standard, and I want to make sure that there is nothing out there that offers the appearance of conflict or the potential for future conflict. I run a small nonprofit news organization. Funding is rough. When you fund things to the tunes of tens of millions of dollars at a time, funding can only get rougher. And you have to be very careful where the money comes from and what the motives may be of funders. Even if David Koch has been on your board for a long, long time, and I know that he has, I would still say count the silverware and watch your back. It doesn't matter how strong your backbone is and how strong your journalistic integrity is. And again, this is not, as far as I'm concerned, this is not about Nova and its integrity. They are first rate, and we can't live without them in the world of science journalism. That's one of the reasons why this is a big deal. I don't think PBS or WGBH would do a show on politics and accept money from as big an interested party as the Republican Party or the Democratic Party or the Tea Party. And this to me is on the same level. You don't do something about science and climate and energy and not expect a few questions to be asked, no matter how strong the integrity of Nova is. If one of your big funders is a guy who has had a very clear stake and, as far as I'm concerned, a very detrimental impact on the integrity of science, particularly when climate change is involved. The show was fine, but it's still giving off a little bit of an aroma that we call the appearance of conflict, and you need to be careful about that. I haven't even said boycott the show. I haven't said kick him off the board. I'm saying ask better questions. I don't think that happened in your broadcast last week. No, other than I may not sound like a PBS fan at the moment, but I am. And that's one of the reasons why this is a big deal. I think broadcasting, and particularly science and environment journalism, has really gone in the toilet in this country. And you guys are one of the last hopes. And when we see that there is some level of dependency on David Koch to keep it alive financially, that worries me.